And welcome to this edition of Healing Moments with Martha. I am here today with David Zailer, who joins us from the beautiful west coast of California. Thank you, David. We appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you, Martha. It's nice to see you, and appreciate your friendly smile and your enthusiasm, and I'm glad to join you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and tell a snippet of your story. I have known David for about 6 years. I first heard of David when a mutual friend of ours, Nate Larkin, shared something on Facebook. I reached out to David, and we have been friends since. And David is a prolific writer of truth. One of the biggest reasons I am having David on here today is his ability to communicate truth and talk about his latest book, Death of a Fisherman, his memoirs. David is a writer of a book called Our Journey Home and When Lost Men Come Home, and another 12-step book. And last but not least, Death of a Fisherman, which we were going to center our attention on today. And again, thank you, David, for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I laugh at the whole writing thing because I love it, and I'm very dedicated to working on my craft, and I enjoy doing it. But at the same time, I find myself writing things that I never thought I would ever write.
Yeah.
And I find myself just kind of showing up and doing what I find to do because I don't have anything else better to do.
I found that hard to believe. Well, we are grateful for your journey to this point. And I just wanted to, and David is also founder of Operation Integrity. Can you share really quickly what Operation Integrity is for the people who don't know what that is?
Sure. Operation Integrity is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we are first and foremost educational, in the fact that I believe that education is the first critical step to offer anyone to find an effective recovery. Operation Integrity is also an advocacy organization. So in a nutshell, we inform people about the reality of addiction, and we inspire people to make use of the practical, proven resources for healing and change. And I also do some mentoring of group leaders. Some churches will send their care and recovery ministry leaders to me to get some mentoring work on small group development, understanding the 12 steps, that kind of thing. And out of all of that has grown my personal career as a communicator, and which I've been doing now for going on 20 years. I can't believe it.
Wow, unbelievable. I know you have an anniversary coming up in November, if I remember correctly. Yes.
That is correct. That is correct.
But we're gonna dive into David's story and talk about Death of a Fisherman, his latest writing works. And I must say, I've read all of David's books, and as a communicator of truth and grace, this has been my favorite, Death of a Fisherman. It is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But currently, I've been listening to it on Audible. And the audio version of this is, I have to say, David, is absolutely my favorite.
Well, thank you.
Because hearing David tell his own story and read it himself, the words, they just leap off the page. And you are able to just kind of jump into the page with David. And so if you don't have a copy, I urge you today to go get one. So you will not be disappointed, and your heart will be encouraged and challenged, because it is about faith, family, and forgiveness. So, David, your approach to writing your memoirs, it was quite specific, and you actually revisited your home place there in Houston that you grew up in. When you first revisited your home site there in Houston, what were some of the first things that flashed through your memory and the emotions that you experienced as it came into sight as you were driving down the street and in your old neighborhood? Can you describe that for us, please?
Well, the trips to Houston that I reference in my fisherman book were taken long before I ever thought about writing about them in a memoir. I actually was hired by a company to come down there, and I was part of a team that was developing content for some educational videos.
Mm.
So I was going to Houston for work. Houston's also my hometown, where I don't have a lot of great memories. Even prior to the first trip going to Houston, I found myself just feeling nervous, some anxiety, anger was coming out. I would think about the trips and I would find myself silently cussing. And I wish I could keep my cussing more silent. I could work on that.
Yeah.
But while I was in Houston, I found myself having some amazing encounters with some very interesting people that were changing the trajectory of my experience.
Mm.
You've read the book,
Mm-hmm.
The Gravedigger. I met this young man who was the gravedigger at the cemetery where my parents were buried.
Mm-hmm.
And we became friends.
I mean, when you took a picture of him or with him, correct?
Yes, I don't publish the picture because, I'm not going to intrude upon his privacy.
Yeah.
But that was just one example. Yeah. And I made 4 trips that year. Each trip was kind of a guiding step for me as I began to make peace with my horrible memories of Houston.
Houston. Yeah.
And so, in regards to how that became a memoir, some years later, I'm meeting with my friend Joey O'Connor. Joey's a prolific writer. He's also, one of my dearest friends. I've known him for a long time. And we're having coffee, and he says, "Why don't you write a memoir?" And I said, "Joey, that's about the dumbest idea I have ever known you to come up with." And he kind of like looked at me and it was like, okay, whatever. And that was it. And we went on to talk about something else.
Yeah.
But over the coming weeks, I began to think about what Joey said. And I began to reminisce about these trips to Houston. And I know that these trips to Houston were monumental for me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I'll write an essay about the gravedigger friend. Yeah. And then I thought, well, I'm going to write an essay about the lady at the grocery store, because there was this lady at the grocery store that just cleaned my clock, so to speak. Yes. In this little 3-minute little interaction, she just kind of set me straight. Women are good at that. Whether us men want to admit it or not, women are good at that. And so I started writing these memoirs about these interesting people who I had encountered in Houston. Mm-hmm. And then I suddenly realized, I said, oh my gosh. And I called up Joey and I said, Joey, I think I'm writing a memoir. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got started. And it took me a couple of years to get it all down because I was busy with other things. And quite honestly, this was not a work of production. This was not an informational work. This very much was a process work.
Yeah. And I'm sure as you wrote the book, those emotions resurfaced, and then there was another set of processing probably.
Well, yes. It was also very much, I sensed that it was my time to make peace. The resentment that I have carried for so much of my life, which I've kept hidden I'm really good at that, is my inability to make peace with the reality of the past, to let it just be what it was. And as I wrote about some of these past experiences, with every word put on the page, I was willing to say, it is well with my soul. I'm making peace with it. So that was kind of the personal payoff for me in writing the book.
Absolutely. And what a huge one it is for you, I think. Because we both know spiritual maturity is not made possible really without the emotional healing that our souls are longing for. And so you were doing the brave, hard thing, I think. And then, as one of my favorite quotes from you, to look your fear in the eye is not the bully that you assume. Right. Look at it, right, and it will teach you things. And that's probably not the perfect quote, but it is such a huge nugget of truth that you have consistently shared with me and with your audience. And so I'm grateful for you doing all the work for that to write your memoirs, and that's quite impressive. A lot of people aren't willing to at least even look at it, and for fear that the bad will outweigh the good. I think sometimes keeps us from it. I think we're afraid that we'll get caught up in the bad memories and just stay there.
If there's someone out there who's writing anything sort of a memoir or writing their own story, I think it's helpful to say, I want to be an observer of the reality, and I want to be a steward of the story. God help me find the good ending in it all. And because it's not a novel, we're not making this up as we go.
Yeah.
And there's no way we're going to end up with a positive end while we're still fighting against the reality of the past.
Yeah, absolutely. To admit that it even took place is sometimes a hard part too, as well.
And I will be honest with you, I don't run emotionally naked publicly throughout the world. I write with as much transparency and as honesty as reasonably possible.
Yeah. And that shows in all of your books. That is a common thread.
Yeah. And
your books, absolutely. Yeah. And everybody else that reads them. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Let's talk about your mom for a minute, if you don't mind. Okay. She was beautiful, and I know her name was Polly. Yeah. I love that name. But it was quite evident that you and her had this love relationship as a son and mother often do. And she had a certain grace about her that shone through all of the other mess that was going on. Did she ever talk to you about her relationship with Jesus, or because I know there's a specific example with your mom where she showed forth her grace, I would say. Did she ever talk to you about her relationship with Jesus, or not so much?
Not in what someone might consider an evangelical sense. And my mother's faith was quiet. It was faithful, but it was also exceedingly practical. And it was not contained within the four walls of a brick and mortar church. Now, I don't want to, in our conversation today, I don't want to tell too much about my relationship with my mom, because quite honestly, I want people to be interested enough to buy the book.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. I I do. There is an episode that I write about in the book when I'm 25 years old.
Mhm.
I'm a deeply heartbroken young man drifting into alcoholism and utterly, profoundly abandoned and rejected by my father, of course, who is my mom's husband. And my mom, who suffered throughout her entire marital life with severe depression. I mean, she suffered a loveless, horrible marriage.
Hmm.
But somehow in the midst of all of that, she showed simple kindness to me. It goes far beyond words.
Mhm.
It was presence. It was a faithful communication of, I am here
Mhm.
by your side, even though you have drifted, you've become this person that kind of our religious world would look down upon. The church would make social judgments against.
Yeah.
And my she showed that she had profound love for her son. And that changed everything for me as a relationship with her. She never got well, so to speak. And again, I'm not going to share much more than that because I do want people they'll read it better than I can tell it. But my mother did not let her sickness or her depression stand in the way of showing love. And as her son, that made a huge difference for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there were several profound things that happened to you in your childhood. One at the age of 4 with your mother being sent away. And then at the age of 8, something happened to young David that we still have difficulties talking about today in the church.
Sure.
Can we hit on that for a minute, if you don't mind?
Well, I will very briefly, because again, the book tells it better than I can tell it. At 8 years old, it was the mid 1960s for me. So I am certainly a man of a certain age. I hope the camera here on this Zoom is being friendly to this old man. But I was a man in our church, and also a family friend sexually molested me. And it was a soul-crushing blow for an 8-year-old little boy. And that was something that, and of course, in the 1960s and in the years later, there was no conversation about such. No one even dreamed that kind of thing could even happen.
Yeah.
And it took me, it wasn't until I began to do the work to deal with my alcoholism in 99, because I got sober in 1999, that I began to do the work related to healing from that. So I'll just leave it at that for now, and people can pick up the book and talk about that.
Yes.
And so.
Your dad was a professional organist, well-known, well-respected, educated, but that wasn't necessarily the man you met with every day at home, or your mother, or your sister, as a matter of fact. How old were you, would you say, when you realized you started putting some pieces of the puzzle together, going, this isn't adding up just right? I mean, Dad's not who people perceive that he is. How would you say you were?
Well, when it comes to cognitively, consciously making that decision, there's something wrong with my father, that didn't come for quite some time, perhaps even, but I remember even even in adolescence, knowing that he was someone who, if it came to a schedule on the calendar, he was very reliable. But when it came to him being someone who cared about me, he was not available for that. And I remember even in my, say, 13 or 14 years old, he caught me smoking cigarettes. And he gave me the fatherly talk about all the reasons why I shouldn't smoke and this and that, and this and that. While he's a cigarette smoker, but he lies about it. Everybody, everybody knew my father smoked, but my father would never admit it.
Oh, okay.
And I remember having him sit me down and trying to do, kind of the Ward Cleaver, leave it to Beaver kind of talk. And sitting there the whole time going, this guy's, I mean, his guidance was meaningless. Because because I already knew that he was not on the inside what he tried to portray on the outside. Yeah. And that he had his secrets that were horribly immoral, and that he was cruel to my mother and he was cruel to my sister. And so he had no credibility for me.
So that was already lost for you.
Yeah, I mean,
that was already gone.
Yeah, he demanded to be respected, so I acted as if I did.
Probably to be the peacekeeper or save the peace.
Yeah, just because it wasn't worth the trouble of him getting all upset.
Yeah.
But no, I did not respect him.
Yeah.
He didn't have any credibility.
Yeah.
And that was that.
That was that. Yeah. And again, if you want to know more about this, I advise you highly go get the book, get the audible version of it, and listen to David tell the story of his father. It is so worthy of your time to listen.
So let me do something that's a little bit bizarre on these kinds of podcast things. Remember the end of the book, the last scene in the cemetery where I'm sitting on the bench, and I'm not going to tell you too much because I'm not going to tell too much because I want people, they will enjoy it more reading it than me telling it. But do you remember the last scene where I'm sitting on the bench and just kind of relaxing? It's my last trip to Houston and I have the vision. Do you remember that part?
I do. Yeah, I believe so.
Where my dad, he's struggling, and then my mom swoops in. Remember that? Do you remember that part?
I believe a little bit, yes.
Okay. Well, it was interesting. I'll tell you why. When the last trip I was in Houston, and these trips were every few months over the course of a year. So I'm sitting on this bench almost a year after that first trip to Houston, and I've made trips to my parents' graves in the cemetery every day I'm in Houston. I probably visited their burial site 25 times that year. And I'm sitting there the last time, and just out of the blue, I'll call it a vision. That's what I call it in the book. And I remember it just played out of my head. And I sat there, and as it played out, I just kind of observed it. And then I knew right then and there that this whole year had been a gift to me from God, so that I could relive these moments and experiences in retrospect as an adult man and find the beautiful end of the story.
which was necessary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember you describing in the book how you wanted when you arrived at the grave site, because you had not been able to go on a regular basis because you lived so far away. But how the love for your mother, you wanted to take flowers and show respect and love your mom, and that was not what you wanted to do on your dad's grave. Yeah, and then this, and you can. I think a lot of us have that. A lot. I mean, I know I did. Had that one parent that we were not close with. And I'm just gonna say, I think when people read your book, they will find a lot in there that they can identify with. And all the more reason I'm so glad again that you wrote your book, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm the only one going through this crap, and we're not. And so thank you again for doing all the work and sharing your story with us.
Well, let me just interject here. The bookshelves are full of kind of how to quick answer bullet point things from psychology, religious, our pastoral religious leaders, and they check the boxes. And so people read these books and it says, okay, it's almost like a how-to to become a Major League Baseball player.
It is.
Great. Well, go read the book and then go out and try to be a Major League Baseball player.
It didn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. It takes a lifetime to become a Major League Baseball player.
It does.
And most of the players in the Major League have been playing since they were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of keep working at it.
Yeah. As you frequently have told me over the past several years, enjoy the process, embrace the process. And it is a process.
Well, as Christians, when we talk about walking with Jesus, that is the journey, that is the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Scripture is full of this, and people don't fit, again, because so often people demand a product. They want a guarantee. Right. Give me the end result and put it in a book so that I can read it and check all the boxes. Problem solved. I got it behind me. I don't have to deal with that again.
We are an instant society.
Right. In Scripture,
faith. We don't want the slow cooker.
In Scripture, when people engage with Jesus, the one thing that he consistently offers to them is himself. He says, come follow me.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's it. I do believe that the healing journey for ourselves emotionally goes hand in glove with walking with Jesus. Yeah. And the promise is that he will be there with us in the journey, in the process. He will go before us. He will go behind us, helping us out. He'll be on our right. He'll be on our left. And our job is to put one foot in front of the other and being willing to continue to make the journey. One of the things that struck me when I wrote those first essays about Andrew the gravedigger and the lady, one thing that struck me was that I suddenly realized how I had been guided into a process in these trips to Houston, but I wasn't totally aware of it. Mm-hmm. And then as I wrote the book, I realized, so, here I am in my early 60s writing this book, and my job is to help other people. That's my job. But here I am, God is calling me to do some work to help myself. And so there we go. Looks like we lost our connection there, Martha. Maybe I'll send you a text. Mm.